The noisy noise from the car window came from time to time, but Alan Wilson had already practiced the ability to turn a deaf ear, isolating himself from the curry-flavored English of the outside world. His young face seemed to have been ironed by an iron, and his eyes showed the slightest knot diverted from the newspaper in hand. The headline on the front page read, "The British Empire has the certainty of regaining the whole of Burma in a few months' time." Hey! With a faint sigh, the voice was so low that the person involved could not even hear it. Alan Wilson put away the newspaper and looked out the window indifferently. There was already no strong accented English hawking in his ears. Now the bus has passed through the Delhi Gate and entered New Delhi, the area that would later be the capital of India. Now it is 1945. The biggest difference between New Delhi and Delhi is that New Delhi is completely British. Because Calcutta is too remote, the capital of British India was moved to the newly built urban area of Delhi. New Delhi has long been inhabited by only British people. In 1945, this was the biggest problem faced by Alan Wilson. The British Empire, which had been running around the world for 300 years, had already declined. Although there were still 30 million square kilometers of colonies, 5 million troops were fighting on battlefields around the world. But the end of this world war is the beginning of the decline of the British Empire. Compared with the two armies of the United States and the Soviet Union, one that dominates the land and the other that dominates the sea, it seems that the post-war world has lost the position of the former hegemon of the British Empire, which makes Alan Wilson, a man who is ready to replicate the journey of countless classic protagonists. Civil servants feel at a loss. With the blessing of past life memories, Alan Wilson certainly understands that the trumpet of the disintegration of the British Empire is on the land under his feet. The most important colony of the British Empire in the world, the British India with an area of more than 4 million square kilometers, was the first to sound. And this is simply unstoppable. Don't say that Alan Wilson is just an inexperienced civil servant. Even if he is now the Governor of India, there is no independent voice that cannot ignore the consensus of British India. Day or night, what benefits can be gained from it? After getting off the bus and being checked by the guards, Alan Wilson stood in front of the Indian Governor's Palace, which looked like the White House, and swept his eyes from the British Indian flag on the dome of the Governor's Palace. Just ahead. "Sir, what's the matter with you?" The guard who had just finished the inspection looked at Alan Wilson and said with some amusing, "But a person as young as you is rarely seen in the Governor's Palace." "I'll take it as a compliment, thank you." Alan Wilson bowed his head slightly, replied with a smile, and by the way concealed his embarrassment just now, and walked towards a building that was somewhat similar to the White House. The Governor's Palace is full of office workers in a hurry, and in a well-lit room, the current Governor of India, Archibald Percival Wavell, is reaching out to absorb heat in front of the fireplace. "His head is not," he asked back. "Baron, the Muslim League and the Congress Party have left." "Yes, Governor, they have already left." The man named Baron looked to be in his 40s, his face was clean and he was obviously well groomed, and he replied solemnly, "Every time the two sides meet, the differences seem to be more than the same. More at a time, not less, not just for both parties, but for us as well. Damn it, the Prime Minister definitely doesn't want to hear this news." Governor Wavell yelled in a low voice, but it was more a helpless sigh than a curse. Compared with the public news that the frontline Anglo-Indian Corps had invaded the territory of Burma and was about to bring shame on the Japanese, the internal disputes that gave him a headache from time to time could always dilute his good mood as an Indian governor. They and their representatives, Ali Jinnah and Nehru, really give us a lot of headaches. Mr. Governor. Although Baron still had a calm look, he had to admit that compared to the world that has seen the dawn of victory, the big question is whether the pearl of the British Empire still shines as brightly as it does now. There was a suffocating embarrassment in the room. Except for the charcoal fire burning in the fireplace, there was no sound. Although there are some liberal imperialists in the Conservative Party, they claim that the input of India and even the entire colony has exceeded the output. They hope that the British Empire will give up the entire colony and stop the current loss-making business. Just like Adams, the author of The Wealth of Nations 150 years ago, who called for the independence of the 13 North American states, he believed that British India, like the original North American states, had become a black hole that consumed the wealth of the British Empire. But in the Conservative Party, this kind of voice is not the mainstream. Now the Prime Minister of the British Empire, Churchill, has always claimed to defend the glory of the British Empire, but now several prominent figures in British India know in their hearts that things are far from being so simple. Inform London, Baron, of the Anglo-Indian Army in Burma. Governor Wavell withdrew his hands in front of the fireplace and sighed, London still hopes for more good news, leaving the Congress Party and the Muslim League behind. Yes, Governor. Agreeing with a stylized smile, Baron stepped back in place and walked out of the room. In the entire Indian governor's palace, as is the norm during the war, everyone was in a hurry to deal with the information of British India and the entire Southeast Asian battlefield, which seemed very busy. Baron, who left Governor Wavell, waited for his guest today with a gentle face. At this time, he was not idle, but played chess with himself and himself wholeheartedly. After a while, the assistant pushed the door open, and Alan Wilson walked in behind him. Baron didn't look up, took the last step, finished the game of chess, and then looked up at the young man in front of him. He got up and stretched his finger to a place for Alan Wilson to sit down. Then he returned to his place and took out a stack of document bags. He looked at it for himself, and looked at the person coming from the corner of his eye, as if he was verifying his identity. You are Grote Wilson's son, and I am deeply saddened by the passing of your father. He and I had a good relationship. Baron said, looking at the document. Born in London in 1924, then he went to live in Hong Kong with his father's work. Before the Pearl Harbor incident, he obtained information that was extremely important to the Allies, and then fell to Calcutta in the colony of Hong Kong. Before the war, you had been admitted to the Eastern College of Oxford University. Speaking of which, Baron closed the file bag and said, your father could have had a bigger job, but unfortunately, there are still more diseases in South Asia. Alan, you are younger than I thought. Maybe this is not an advantage. Entering the Eastern Department mainly comes from my father's work experience. Alan Wilson replied softly, he couldn't help sighing in his heart. He had used the special environment of the colony to persuade his father in this life to change his age to an older age. He is 3 years old, because the primary and secondary school courses are really not difficult for him. This makes the growth experience seem normal. As for providing information on Pearl Harbor, his original intention was to be a rich second generation who can do it well. While gilding, he made his father, a civil servant, rise to prominence. As a result, his wishes were not fulfilled, and the responsibility for starting a business fell on his shoulders. Very good, but don't be too modest. Your studies are very beautiful. If it weren't for the outbreak of the World War, you could have become the youngest graduate of Oxford University in recent years. Baron sat on the chair and nodded with satisfaction, then changed the conversation and asked. Deo, although I haven't completed my studies, I have accumulated some concepts about Oriental studies. What do you think of India? Baron knew the purpose of the people of this age. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com also knew the purpose of the question asked by the Chief of Civil Servants. Hey! Alan Wilson pondered for a while, and quickly gave the answer. There is no doubt that in the time period of the agricultural era, the Eastern countries can accumulate far larger than Europe due to their advantages in scale and geographical factors. South Asia is the best among them, and British India has always been the cornerstone of the prosperity of the British Empire, the most splendid jewel in the crown. Baron nodded in approval, and then heard Alan Wilson continue, it is because of the wealth created by the extensive colonies that the British Empire can face the attack of challenger after challenger, whether it is Napoleon or William II. The world. India is a land of wealth. Oxford University started the systematic study of Orientalism, and produced a large number of talents who have a broad vision, and are more aware of the nature of the world than other European countries with a narrower thinking. In the end, Alan Wilson also praised Oxford University. He knew that Baron was also born in Oxford University, and from this aspect, the relationship between the two sides was closer. Obviously, Baron was very satisfied with the young man who came here. Thinking that the other's father had a good relationship with him, he also had a little bit of support in his heart. In British India, Baron's authority was no worse than a few prominent figures. As the leader of the civil service, Baron quickly asked about his views on British India, as well as the Congress Party, the Muslim League, and the knowledge of local Indian politicians such as Gandhi, Nehru, and Ali Jinnah. Alan Wilson gave his own answers to this, and gave some future ideas. Do you think Nehru is a powerful person? Baron crossed his fingers together and asked in an uncertain tone. Yes, Sir Baron. Alan Wilson nodded solemnly. Nehru's own thoughts are more worthy of attention than Gandhi, who has always imagined rural life. Alan Wilson was quiet, but very firm. In fact, Nehru, the leader of the Congress Party, and Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, are very powerful political figures. As far as Nehru is concerned alone, he is a person who cannot be compared with the old immortal Modi in later generations. And Ali Jinnah, who represents another faction, is also a thoroughly secular political figure. Whether it is Hinduism or peace religion, he is a tool in the hands of two people, and they themselves have no religious overtones. Compared with Nehru, the leader of the Muslim League, Ali Jinnah, is a leader who is completely close to the West, and even the religious views of the Muslim League have not been seen by Ali Jinnah for a long time. However, as a minority, Ali Jinnah was inevitably influenced by the Muslim League, and Ali Jinnah's health was not good. After his death, the Muslim League in Pakistan quickly entered the road of religiousization. Nehru of the Congress Party is completely different. Nehru always respects Indian culture, but he is not ambiguous when it comes to shooting. During his tenure, he carried out land reforms, defeated Pakistan, and reversed the world's impression of Hindus' cowardly fighting power. The recovery of Portuguese Goa has boosted the confidence of the whole country in India. In the final analysis, Alan Wilson believes that this has a huge relationship with Nehru's visit to the Soviet Union in the neonatal period when he was young. The shock is also very normal, which led to Nehru adopting a lot of Soviet methods to solve domestic affairs after India's independence. If it weren't for that war, Nehru might have really built India into a great power. Listening to the serious young man standing in front of him answering his own question, Baron nodded with satisfaction. A strange emotion surged in his heart. It was hard to imagine that this realization came from the mouth of a young man in his early 20s. It is a time of war, and many departments need talents. Sir Baron pondered and said, during the Battle of Impole, your father did a lot of work in Calcutta, whether it was the theatre, the governor's palace or the colonial department. In our eyes, we also need to consider the views of those who have meritorious deeds. Following Baron's words, Alan Wilson became more and more careful. He knew that his path was all within the other's thoughts. Well, considering your age, Mumbai, Calcutta, and even Delhi are a little too conspicuous. Now the 17 provinces of India are not suitable for you to start a job. But for your father's sake, I can make you from an easy start work at the position of the rank, a job with a high status. Baron said while thinking, you become the Hyderabad commissioner, what do you think? Thank you, Sir Baron. Alan Wilson was stunned for a moment, and thanked him with the surprise in his heart. British India is managed by the Governor's Office and the British Commissioner. There are a total of 17 provinces, occupying 2/3 of what is now British India, and the remaining own a third of the land. There are more than 560 provinces. Tabang. These princely states ranged from large to small. The small princely states were merely the larger landlords, while the larger princely states were treated with great courtesy in the United Kingdom as the head of a country. Among the more than 500 states, the most powerful state is Hyderabad, which Sir Baron said. It is the largest in British India in terms of area and population. Of Kashmir. While Alan Wilson was still thinking, Sir Baron said to himself, although Hyderabad is not actually under the control of British India, it is no less important than the provinces controlled by the Governor's Palace. Among the more than 100 states, Hyderabad can be regarded as a weather vane, so you don't have to worry about it, the importance is the same. Sir Baron also felt that Alan Wilson was a little disappointed with his arrangement, explaining the importance of Hyderabad, mentioning, now the local ruler is Mir Osman Ali Khan, a ruler respected by London. Communication with him is no less than working in a province under our control. Maybe it will be more comfortable to work in various provinces of India, but considering the age of Alan Wilson, Sir Baron is not good because of too much personal friendship. Among the Indian states under the indirect control of the British Empire, giving each other a good position is not a good idea. It will appear too conspicuous and will not be caught by others. After all, it is a time of world war. Some old rules can be broken, but a certain amount of heat must be mastered. Alan Wilson was not dissatisfied with this. He also knew that Sir Baron in front of him had done his best, and within the current rules, he could only do so much. During the Battle of Imphal, your father helped me a lot and maintained the stability of India. Finally, Sir Baron mentioned the past, and Alan Wilson understood it. Speaking of Alan Wilson's father, since he fled to India, old Wilson quickly found a way to continue his struggle in the civil service, and finally established a firm foothold in Calcutta. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. Kolkata was the capital of British India before New Delhi. The United Kingdom has been operating in Kolkata for half a century. New Delhi was the capital only 30 years ago. In this era, it is undoubtedly the second largest city in India. After the Battle of Burma, the centre of Bangladesh faced the threat of the Japanese army until the outbreak of the Battle of Imphal. As for Old Wilson, it was during this time that, according to Sir Baron's orders, Calcutta was maintained. But this is not what Sir Baron meant. The main reason for giving Alan Wilson a high look is the outbreak of the Great Bengal Famine. British India always had a famine, but the Bengal famine 2 years ago exceeded 3 million people. He was starved to death at the time before and after the Battle of Imphal. Old Wilson can be said to be to blame, as is Sir Baron, the chief of British Indian civil servants who worked in the Governor's Palace. Alan Wilson breathed a sigh of relief. Because of his father's relationship, he finally got what he wanted at the Governor's Palace. At this moment, Sir Baron said, "Don't be too happy, I can only recommend candidates. You should know that the final decision is still in the hands of Governor Wavell, and if there is no accident, I will inform you of the good news in a while." "Thank you, Sir Baron." Alan Wilson took out a gold coin and said to himself, "I got this from a businessman. I personally hope that Sir Baron doesn't care about his metal composition, but from seeing the precious Indian history above is like seeing the wide-ranging Oriental world, just like the academic issues studied by the Oriental Institute. Precious historical value, I think so." Sir Baron tacitly reached out and took it. He glanced at the sunlight streaming in from the window, and seemed to sigh in admiration for the pattern on it. It is only now that Sir Baron realizes how important it is to help the younger generation and add fresh blood to the British Empire's civil service system. This is also for the sake of political stability. Alan Wilson has his own understanding that British India is the jewel in the crown of the Empire in every way. More important than Canada, Australia, even the 13 states of North America, and all other British colonies. As for any colony under its jurisdiction, it cannot be compared with British India from any point of view. It is simply the loss of British India and the comfort of the British. The reason why I say this is because British India has a huge size, and even relying on its own advantages in area, resources, and population, its economic aggregate and important economic indicators have surpassed that of modernized Japan, and it is the first in Asia and farther away. Far superior to other imperial entities. During the First World War, at the same time, the fiscal revenue of the British and Indian governments was 1 billion rupees, about 100 million pounds, about half of the British mainland, basically the same as the Japanese government, and far more than Canada, Australia, South Africa, and other entities. This also takes into account the Anglo-German naval competition and the result of the local British gritting their teeth and raising taxes. In peacetime, the financial revenue of British India is an indispensable part of the British Empire. This led to the fact that the status of British India was extremely important. Except for Napoleon's brief time, the United Kingdom worked hard in Europe. In almost all the time of the 19th century, the United Kingdom formulated policies for the security of British India, whether it was attacking Burma or going north to Afghanistan is for this. If it weren't for 1945, Alan Wilson would have reason to believe that the civil servants in the United Kingdom would definitely have worked tirelessly across the ocean to work in India. This is a colony after all, and they don't have to endure the various checks and balances of the United Kingdom and work in a colony. You can enjoy the treatment of a superior person. Therefore, Sir Baron has indeed given Alan Wilson a great convenience. If he goes back a few decades, it can even be said that he can directly reach the sky in one step, saving 20 years of struggle. But now it is different. Alan Wilson understands that British India, the crown jewel of the empire, is about to break away from the control of the British Empire. Now he must use the little time left to accumulate as much qualifications and wealth as possible. Nor is it easy. As for the position of Hyderabad, he was ready to accept it without saying a word. Although it was a territorial state and it belonged to the area under indirect British rule, it also had great advantages in it. Just like the monarch of Hyderabad, Mir Osman Ali Khan. The popularity of this person is worldwide, because in 1937 he was rated as the world's richest man by the United States. Hyderabad will become a starting point for Alan Wilson's future career. He hopes it will be smoother. Alan Wilson left the governor's house because Sir Baron had made it clear that it was always easier for him to recruit a few assistants of his own, with the help of those he could trust. Before leaving, Alan Wilson was still carrying a briefcase, and listening to Sir Baron said that it contained the examination questions of British Indian civil servants, which made Waylon Wilson sigh. But after thinking about it, he felt relaxed. It was much smoother than he thought before. Being able to get the position of commissioner in Hyderabad is already a bonus, and he can't ask for too much. Taking the bus home and opening the test paper, in fact, I can already see some of the real environment in British India right now. The relationship between the Muslim League and the Congress Party, as well as the British Indian province and the native states, are all issues that the governor's office needs to solve at present. On the other hand, Sir Baron is persuading Governor Wavell about the Commissioner of Hyderabad. A child who can be said to be a genius, if not for the outbreak of war, maybe the youngest person admitted to Oxford University in recent years, but still a little too young. Governor Wavell frowned and asked, "Let him do it." Commissioner Hyderabad, did it start too smoothly? On the contrary, Mr. Governor, the Commissioner of Hyderabad is more suitable. It is different to put it in the province and in the state. The monarch of Hyderabad is the distinguished guest of London. According to the agreement between us and the state, though we can't put too much power in Hyderabad, and we can't do it now. British India is already busy with 100,000 civil servants. For a state with such a strong power in Hyderabad, we need to maintain the status of commissioner. At the same time, we can't go too far, and one-sided interference will also make the monarch of Hyderabad dissatisfied, so Alan is just right. Sir Baron opened his mouth eloquently and went around, just to make it clear that Alan Wilson did the commissioner in Hyderabad is the most suitable, not the second choice. The direction of the war is already very obvious, and the Axis bloc has come to a dead end, but from the perspective of British India, the future direction is still unknown, whether British India will continue to be under British rule in the future, or will it be directly independent. Governor Wavell and Sir Baron, of course, Understand that faraway London is also quarrelling fiercely over the question of British India, and in this matter, not only the Soviet Union, but also another comrade in arms, the United States, who is fighting side by side, even in some kind of war. To a certain extent, the United States is more dangerous than the Soviet Union. UU reading www.uuganshu.com. For the 100,000 civil servants of British India, the future is still uncertain, and not even Governor Wavell and Sir Baron, the Governor-General of British India and the chief civil servants of British India, can guarantee their words on the matter right. Under such uncertainty, Sir Baron himself can't see the future, and small unreasonable arrangements are no longer a big deal. In the middle of the night, while Alan Wilson was still answering questions, Sir Baron's last paper asked about supporters of British Indian rule, and after a long reflection, he wrote, "The Untouchables, and more than 500 the monarch of a native country, the Congress and the Muslim League are the two opponents, and Nehru and Ali Jinnah are just different methods. The Congress party represented by Nehru wants to take over all the rights of the entire British India, while the Muslim League headed by Ali Jinnah does not want to live in the same country as the Hindus. It's the same for the government, but it's different for the pacifists and the Hindus. It's a conflict between the Muslim League and the Congress. Under the rule of British India, the untouchables have certain rights. As for the monarchs of more than 500 native states, they are happy to maintain their current status. On the contrary, they have doubts about the Congress Party and the Muslim League. When I went to Hyderabad, my mission was to make the monarch of Hyderabad the support of British India. Mir Osman Ali Khan has the most powerful strength among many Indian states, and he is also a pacifist, a minority in the whole of India, even in the state of Hyderabad, believe Mir Osman. Ali Khan is very willing to maintain a peaceful relationship with London. Who is the enemy and who is the friend has always been a very important question. I have enough knowledge of South Asia." Sir Baron held Alan Wilson's answer sheet and sighed in his heart. Although he was an open book exam and gave Alan Wilson a chance to cheat, he may have this understanding, which means that Alan Wilson, although Wilson is young, he has matured the ability to handle things. He said calmly, "The institutions stationed in Hyderabad state are mainly institutions that communicate with the monarch of Hyderabad, but there are only more than 200 people, even if the various institutions in Hyderabad are added together. We British are less than 1,000. Although not as good as Delhi, Mumbai and Calcutta, it is still a very important place, and it is necessary to maintain harmonious relations with the monarch Mir Osman Ali Khan. To maintain a harmonious relationship, I think the most important point is sincerity, and I am ready for this, Sir Baron." Alan Wilson nodded slightly and said, "The local has its own currency, and the monarch controls the railway. The post office and the army. Mir Osman Ali Khan's attitude towards London will play an important role in leading the more than 500 princely states at present, and I will definitely be very sincere and approach people. You know, I will give you the appointment letter in 3 days. How about the newly recruited assistants? I heard that you went to Delhi University and recruited young people." Sir Baron replied with satisfaction, then the conversation changed, "Although I don't want to interfere in your work, the arrogance of young people should be put away, and the assistants you recruited should be controlled. Our rule over British India is not blindly coercive, but full of flexibility. Coercion is not the solution, and sometimes it is South Asian traditions to find solutions." Alan Wilson nodded, "How to maintain the greatest stability with the least force, I believe no one is more skilled than the United Kingdom. During a certain period of time when British India existed, the governor also tried to break the caste system in India, but later found that instead of awakening the support of the lower classes for the British Empire, it caused the middle and upper classes to have an impact on the British rule, and then gave up the support of the British Empire. The idea of the caste system has not encountered uncontrollable chaos since then. As for the relationship between the two major religions in India, in the history of British India, the governor of British India has repeatedly performed horizontal jumps. As for his current destination, the state of Hyderabad, happens to be very suitable for the conditions of dividing and conquering British India. The state of Hyderabad is the largest state in British India. Its largest area is similar to that of the British mainland, with a population of 20 million. From any point of view, its strength is no less than that of any province in British India. What makes Alan Wilson even more happy is that the monarch, Mir Osman Ali Khan, is a pacifist. 80% of the population of Hyderabad state is Hindu. This is the complete opposite of Kashmir, which later caused Pakistan and India to compete. Kashmir is a Hindu monarch who rules the majority of the pacifists in the jurisdiction. It is a pity that the monarch, the Hyderabad state of Mir Osman Ali Khan, is too far from the northwestern part of today's British India, where the pacifists are powerful, and cannot get the support of the people of the same faith. The entire Hyderabad state is surrounded by India. This led to the eventual failure of Mir Osman Ali Khan's plans for independence. Mir Osman Ali Khan was known for his wealth, and he was considered one of the richest men in the world due to his vast possessions of jewels and gold. It is estimated to be worth $2 billion in this era. So it was featured in Time magazine. The family of Ali Khan has ruled the Indian state of Hyderabad since the 18th century. Ali Khan is the only Indian who does not live in England but has a high title of royal family, mainly because he was in the first during World War II. He donated huge sums of money to the British Treasury for free. When the new officer took office, Alan Wilson also handed over the list of assistants he selected from the University of Delhi to Sir Baron, the leader of British Indian civil servants. In fact, 100,000 British civil servants controlled a colony as large as British India. There is no problem of institutional bloat. Even if there is this problem, it is the problem of millions of Indian civil servants. Therefore, Sir Baron did not have an opinion on the selection of 10 assistants. Even if these college students are just still at the University of Delhi, or they have not graduated for a long time, they have insufficient qualifications, and it is not a problem. The main problem of the review is that these young people at Delhi University are not expected to have obvious Soviet tendencies. Sir Baron did not conceal this from Alan Wilson, and he was prepared to prevent the expansion of the Soviet Union's influence, which had begun almost as soon as the Soviet Union was established. During World War II, the United Kingdom tried its best to direct the anger of Germany to the Soviet Union. In the end, it was partially successful. The successful part was taken by the British Empire itself. You have to know that there is an organization in the UK called the Cambridge Five. Will it go crazy? Listening to Sir Baron's words, Alan Wilson's mouth twitched. That was the pride of the Soviet spy agency during the Cold War. Work. The thought in his mind also flashed, and now the movement of the 5 heroes of Cambridge is too far from his current work. Reading www.UU Whether Com is promoted with the help of the other party, or uses the other party's life to add luster to his resume, it will be a matter of the future. Now he must first be in British India, the most important colony that is about to break away from the United Kingdom. Make a success. It is precisely because of the importance of British India that Sir Baron felt that he could not be too careful. In the end, nothing was found. All came to an end with the appointment of Commissioner Alan Wilson Hyderabad. In the presence of 10 male and female assistants from Delhi University who had just completed the investigation of whether they were pro-Soviet elements, Al Wilson finally found a slight sense of leadership. Although these 10 assistants and himself were all 20, the appearance of many years old is like a child's play, but in the context of the World War, it is not so unacceptable. The place we are going to work is Hyderabad in the Deccan Plateau. Before I do it again, I have something to explain in advance. Alan Wilson looked at the assistants who could be described as the troops of the headquarters and cleared his throat. In an official tone, when dealing with the monarch of Hyderabad, you must show courtesy. This is a must. We can advise on internal affairs of Hyderabad, but there must be no interference. That's just a native country, we represent the British Empire. An assistant named Andy whispered softly. The monarch of Hyderabad is a distinguished guest in London, and even if the Queen sees it, she will treat each other with courtesy. The state is not under the direct jurisdiction of the governor's palace, and the monarch's authority in the state cannot be challenged. This is different from the provinces in British India. Alan Wilson said indifferently, unless you think your authority is greater than that of the Queen. Before starting, Alan has already entered the role of commissioner. Really? What a great authority! After the first social beating of these college students who had just left the campus and entered the society, Alan Wilson continued, since the UK entered South Asia, Hyderabad has always appeared as an ally of our UK. When Diraba was still called Nizam, he helped us defeat the Maratha Empire. In the 3 Maratha Wars, Hyderabad sent troops to help the expeditionary force achieve decisive victories, and the same was true in the 4 Mysore Wars. Even the Great Indian Uprising of 1857, after that our relationship with Hyderabad has been harmonious until now. After the Great Indian Uprising, British India no longer aimed to nibble and annex. It can be said that the Indian princes at that time and the Great Indian Uprising achieved their goal to some extent. Of course, the biggest beneficiary is the sea that has always appeared with the British Allied forces. In the native state of Diraba, after Maratha and Mysore were eliminated from the stronger local forces than Hyderabad, Hyderabad became the most powerful remaining one of the Indian princes. Before that, the operation of the East India Company was to use excuses to find trouble with these princely states, to confiscate the other party's land under the pretext that the other party had no heirs, or to find some other excuse to continuously annex and directly manage the land of these princely states. This method is very similar to the reform of the land in the Ming and Qing dynasties. They are all trying to put the land of these native states under the management of the East India Company. After the Indian Uprising, the reform of the land and returning to the current state is considered it stopped, forming the pattern of more than 500 native states in South Asia. Before leaving, Alan Wilson, who had just entered the British civil service and was still a rookie, gave a profound ideological education to his assistants who were even more rookie than himself. In a sense, the Hyderabad commissioner was regarded as an advisor, in front of Mir Osman Ali Khan, is not qualified to pretend to be a dragon. If in normal times, the Hyderabad commissioner is almost no different from the distribution, it can be easily ignored in front of the monarch of Hyderabad, and London will not be dissatisfied with the fact that a commissioner is ignored, which is the most powerful in British India today. How about the monarch of the native country? But it is different now, at least Alan Wilson thinks it is different. The British are indeed superior to others in British India, but the boundaries of class and nationality are not completely unbreakable. It's 1945 now, and Alan Wilson has no tricks to help British India continue to exist. It's not that I haven't thought about it at all, but it's all when I'm dreaming. At this sensitive point in time, the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from South Asia is the general trend. He believes that there are still many things he can do, whether it is from the perspective of private interests or from a larger scope to play a positive role. As for the small sacrifices that may occur in this process, the great Indian people need to be more forgiving. Even his own cheap father, because of a little change in history, became the man who faced the Great Famine in Bangladesh. At this level of the worsening situation of the Indians, Alan Wilson would have nothing to work hard. There are still a few days before going to Hyderabad to take office. As a trusted commissioner of Hyderabad, Alan Wilson did not show respect to the huge people of British India as he said, but turned around and planned a plan. Route. The city along the Ganges is densely populated and has certain industrial facilities. Sir Baron was stunned by Alan Wilson's question. Why was this young man not in a hurry to take office in Hyderabad, but asked such an endless question? The Central Province and the United Provinces are the most densely populated places in South Asia. Sir Baron replied in confusion, Alan, what are you asking about this matter? Hyderabad is in South India. Sir Baron, I'm just calculating what route is suitable. Alan Wilson replied with a chuckle. In fact, this is just his selfishness. He just wants to see the real landscape of the Ganges. Are there any pollutants in it? as well as corpses. This is also for the sake of the British Empire. Although he does not know the local public opinion in the United Kingdom during the independence process of British India, according to common sense, the United Kingdom, which is still the world's three giants, must have public opinion on letting India become independent. Rebound. If this kind of backlash of public opinion is eliminated, Alan has a trick that is not very popular. He thinks of the famous Ganges floating corpse in later generations. That set of photos is not only famous in China, but widely circulated in countries all over the world. From the perspective of cultural attack, a set of photos of floating corpses in the Ganges almost trampled the dignity of the entire Indian underfoot. Together with the importance of the Ganges in Hinduism, it almost brought a huge negative to the country of India. Influence. Together with the of India that fermented a few years later, and the topic of toilets, the whole of India has been nailed to the pillar of shame. In this way, after British India lost control, Alan Wilson could use the collected information to make British public opinion more acceptable and win this public opinion war. As long as it shows that it is not the British that is not doing enough, but that the Indian mud can't support the wall, the United Kingdom can't continue to waste time in that cesspool. Independence is no longer difficult to accept. Unfortunately, until Alan Wilson set off, he still didn't find the scene he wanted in the upper Ganges. Fortunately, there were still 2 years left, and Alan was not particularly anxious. Alan Wilson, who left New Delhi and got on the train, officially started his career as a civil servant. Before he arrived in Hyderabad, he had already kept the information about the local monarch Mir Osman Ali Khan in his heart. Ali Khan is thin and withered in stature. No matter how he looks, he doesn't look like a rich man. He has only worn one fez in his life, and usually wears ragged slacks. Every time he eats, he licks the plate clean. His bedroom could hardly be called a bedroom, with waste paper baskets everywhere and a straw mat in the middle. However, it is such a person who is so stingy with himself, but he is worthy of the name of the richest man in the world. Although some people are rich enough to rival the country, they don't show much love for wealth. Alan Wilson is not connoting anyone. If you don't love money, you can like other things. From Ali Khan's later experience, he knows that the monarch of Hyderabad actually understands that all wealth is based on power of keeping Hyderabad in an independent position. But in the end, he was no match for Nehru, the leader of the Congress Party. The independence attempt was finally smashed. In the final analysis, Mir Osman Ali Khan was a pacifist. If his native state and Kashmir were exchanged, the outcome would be much better. Before arriving in Hyderabad, before leaving North India, Alan Wilson and his party had to stop for a day at a railway station. After inquiring, they found out that it was the local peacekeepers and Hindus who were fighting. Can't these people from South Asia do something more meaningful? It was the assistant Alan recruited from Delhi University named Andy, who was publishing arrogant comments about the suzerain, which seemed very easier said than done. In the past 2 years, there have been a lot of fights between pacifists and Hindus, both in the capital states and in the provinces directly under the central government. Alan put down the cup he carried with him and replied from the perspective of a bystander, "This shows that another round of religious conflict is already brewing, which has a huge relationship with Nehru of the Indian National Congress and Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, and the conflict is becoming more and more intense, affecting the two major religions." After speaking, Alan Wilson kept his mouth shut. Of course, this has something to do with Britain. Since the First World War, British India has adopted the method of using peaceful Christians to check and balance Hindus. This is because during the First World War, India supported Britain in fighting, hoping that Britain would give India the same status as Canada and Australia. However, the United Kingdom broke its promise. In order to suppress the dissatisfaction of the Indians, it deliberately raised the status of the pacifists, not to mention others. The current Prime Minister of the British Empire, Churchill, was one of the initiators of this strategy. After a day's delay, apart from letting everyone ridicule the Indians, the fight this time had no effect. The dead were all Indians, and they were all British. After a week of stop and go, the group finally arrived in Hyderabad. At this time, the army of the Hyderabad state was already waiting here to welcome the arrival of the new Hyderabad commissioner. The two sides are in harmony, like an old friend they haven't seen for a long time. The state of Hyderabad is in South Asia, but it is the old leading party of the British Empire. The cooperative relationship that lasted for more than 300 years laid the foundation for the birth of British India. Respected gentlemen, it's surprising that you and your assistants are so young. Not surprisingly, we will establish a long-term relationship. Ali Khan's son introduced himself and expressed his friendliness with a smile. I hope so. Alan Wilson also spoke very politely, as if he didn't know that the other party's good days were only 3 years at best, and he created a friendly look with the person who greeted him. From the Maratha War to the Indian Uprising, Alan Wilson tried his best to create an atmosphere of good relations between the British and the rulers of Hyderabad. Thinking about it, in addition to touting each other, he came to Hyderabad for the first time. Did nothing for a day. Wars all over the world seem to be irrelevant in this native country that has lasted for more than 200 years. After taking over the British agency in Hyderabad, Alan discovered something and had to re-evaluate the status of the Hyderabad state. Hyderabad could actually directly contact the Ministry of Indian Affairs in London. The Ministry of Indian Affairs is an important department in the United Kingdom and accepts the leadership of the Minister of Indian Affairs. After all, British India is extremely important to the world hegemony of the British Empire. The United Kingdom has carried out many military operations because of India's security issues. In many military operations, Hyderabad has sent troops to assist. However, in this World War, the Hyderabad state did not contribute much, and the reason is very simple. The Allies and role of the Hyderabad state are mainly aimed at the interior of British India. That is to say, what kind of civil strife has occurred in South Asia, which reflects the value of Hyderabad and allows it to play the role of the leading party, such as the World War, the threat of the Japanese army to British India, without the role played by the Hyderabad state. Unexpectedly, Hyderabad could directly contact the London side. Knowing this, Alan Wilson got in touch with the London side through the telegram here, indicating that he, the Hyderabad commissioner, had arrived, returned his report and asked for instructions at the same time. Is a mature civil service a good thing or a bad thing? Alan Wilson's mouth twitched when he saw the reply from London, which was no less than 8-legged text, because British India was so important to the United Kingdom. On the issue of India, the UK has its own national conditions here, and there are not one or two departments that can manage India, and there is an objective fact of cross-management. At present, as far as the Indian Governor's Office, the military chiefs of the Southeast Asian theatres, and the Ministry of Indian Affairs can speak about the affairs of British India, Alan Wilson, who has entered the civil service of the British Empire, knows that the so-called British civil service system is efficient. Just fart, there is no time to be efficient except when collecting taxes. In the evening, in the area inhabited by the British in Hyderabad, a local soldier came, and when he saw Alan Wilson, he went straight to the point and said, "Mr. Alan, our Maharaja Ali Khan will meet you tomorrow, I come and let me know." "Please reply, Alan will be there on time tomorrow." Knowing the other party's intention, Alan Wilson immediately put away his irritability and replied calmly, "Building a bridge between Hyderabad and London is itself a commissioner. What should be done?" This statement is righteous and awe-inspiring, as if it really is like this. Reading www.uuganshu.com. As for the purpose of the monarch of Hyderabad, there is no need to guess, and they will naturally say when they meet each other. The area of Hyderabad state is almost the same as that of the British mainland, with an estimated population of 20 million. Although the monarch Mir Osman Ali Khan gives a stingy reputation, as the monarch of this state, the palace he lives in fully reflects the authority of the king of a country. The palace is huge, with a Middle Eastern style. Under the guidance of the servants, Alan Wilson walked through the garden in the palace, and under the attention of many guards, he came to the palace. During this process, he just heard the sound of chanting, and he understood after a moment. Now, Mir Osman Ali Khan is a pacifist and should have just prayed. Then Alan Wilson met at the palace, the current largest monarch in South Asia, Mir Osman Ali Khan. Mir Osman Ali Khan himself is short and has a mustache under his nose. To be honest, he is somewhat similar to the head of the Third Reich. As a monarch, he is more like a low-level peasant than the most powerful monarch in South Asia. While Alan Wilson was looking at each other, Mir Osman Ali Khan was also looking at the new commissioner in Hyderabad, squinting his eyes for a moment, and said, "You are so young, I believe New Delhi is also very kind to you." Important. Rather, it's more about gold. Alan Wilson smiled in his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that after he arrived in India, he jumped up the old Wilson to dig the Golden Temple in India, how could he have the capital to impress Sir Baron? Always have a certain ability to work, otherwise Governor Wavell and Sir Baron will not send me over to your place hastily. Alan Wilson paused slightly and said softly, "It's like money. This kind of thing, everyone hopes to have, but the ultimate truth is that some people have it and some people don't. Dear Ali Khan, please allow me, on behalf of the British Empire, to express my truest respect to you, a long-time loyal ally." Alan Wilson was an old civil servant as soon as he opened his mouth, with a just right smile, facing the unbelievable Soil Emperor for 300 years, the cooperation between Hyderabad, the royal family, and the British Empire has always been very pleasant. This harmonious relationship has benefited us a lot. Whether it is in the past or in the future, I hope our friendship will continue. The similarity between you and the previous commissioner is that you speak the same stylized words. Mir Osman Ali Khan smiled slightly, pointed out the common ground of the other party, and waved the servants in the palace to prepare the meal. "I just said after the service, I am now inviting the new commissioner from Hyderabad to have lunch with us as a way to strengthen our relationship with each other. I feel very honored. Your Excellency, your English proficiency surprises me." Alan Wilson accepted the invitation of the other party in a disrespectful manner. Because of the dimension, Hyderabad is considered to be in South India, but because of the Deccan Plateau, the temperature here is not much higher than that of New Delhi. In the climate at the beginning of the year, people feel a little cooler. But apparently Mir Osman Ali Khan, as a native Hyderabad monarch, has become accustomed to the climate here, and prepared tableware for Alan Wilson, while he pilgrims with his hands like ordinary Indians, even with knives and forks ready to put on the side of the plate. It was not until the silver plate was licked clean that Mir Osman Ali Khan said slowly, "As the new Hyderabad commissioner, I very much welcome your arrival. Whether it is New Delhi or London, I believe it has been carefully considered." Only at this time did Alan Wilson know that although this Hyderabad monarch had never left his homeland, he was very well informed. As early as before he left New Delhi, he had already fallen into the eyes of the other party. From inquiring about the success of the Anglo-Indian Army's march into Burma, to hearing that Prime Minister Churchill was about to go to Yalta to hold a meeting with the Soviets, everything was well understood. Far from the look of licking the plate just now. After walking around, Mir Osman Ali Khan asked indifferently, "I heard that Nehru and Ali Jinnah had a lot of trouble, causing a lot of trouble to New Delhi and London. To be honest, I myself don't like the quarrel very much. From the British point of view, of course I don't like it either, my esteemed Majesty." Alan Wilson took a careful look at Mir Osman Ali Khan's expression, and always felt that the other party seemed to mean something, and slowly said, "It seems that your Majesty is very concerned about some rumours and wants to get urgent answers." "Well, I heard some things. Although it's a little bad to ask when the war is not over, please understand that this involves a big problem in Hyderabad." Mir Osman Ali Khan did not hide it. The thin body matched the loud voice and said, "I wonder what London thinks of the current independence movement in British India? Whether it's Ali Jinnah or Nehru's proposition. Alan Wilson almost wanted to scratch his head. This question was beyond the scope of his commissioner's answer. As for whether British India will continue to exist, is it to do its best to maintain it, or let it go and let India become independent? I believe that now in London, neither the Conservative Party nor the Labour Party has an accurate answer, and it should be still under discussion. It seems that Mir Osman Ali Khan is very concerned about this issue, otherwise he would not have asked him, the commissioner who had just arrived, and he was too impatient. But the key is that he really can't answer this question, but just meeting the monarch here, he can't give a clear answer. This may destroy the relationship. Destroying the relationship between the British Empire and Hyderabad is nothing, destroying the personal relationship. It's something Alan Wilson doesn't want to see. The other party is not just the ruler of Hyderabad. Once India becomes independent, he will be expelled. You must know that Mir Osman Ali Khan is still the richest man in the world who has been on the cover of Time magazine. Even if he loses his status as a ruler, his huge wealth, it is still impressive. Even Alan Wilson, who dug the Golden Temple, is no exception. In fact, there is no conclusion in London on this issue. Dear Maharaja, but in my own name, I can imagine several possible situations to judge what kind of attitude the Maharaja will take at that time. Alan Wilson said with a very sincere expression. He spoke in his own name. Oh? Please say it. Mir Osman Ali Khan's face was calm, and he didn't know what he was thinking. In fact, the idea of the Congress Party represented by Nehru himself is a well-known fact. It hopes that after independence, India can maintain the framework of a country, and what it wants is the heritage of the British Empire throughout South Asia. Alan Wilson said. This added, reading www.uuganshu.com. This is the premise of the establishment of India's final independence and success, and as for the Muslim League represented by Ali Jinnah, it is very contradictory to the idea of living in the same country as the Hindus. From the current in terms of attitude, Ali Jinnah's attitude is very tough, and he would rather fight a civil war than compromise. I've heard of Jinnah's attitude, too. Mir Osman Ali Khan nodded, apparently agreeing with Alan Wilson's analysis of the two most powerful local political figures in South Asia, and then changed the subject. But including Hyde, what about the status of the native states, including Rabha? I don't know what the commissioner thinks. Let's imagine the worst outcome. Alan Wilson also knows that now is not the time to hide and tuck in. He must let the monarch of Hyderabad recognize him at the first meeting. He, the commissioner, has a person, not a bribe, even if he did pay a bribe to become a commissioner. Mir Osman Ali Khan was concerned about the ownership of the state, which involved his interests. Alan Wilson also knew that the issue of the native states caused a series of disputes after India's independence. Not to mention Kashmir and Hyderabad, just two issues that did not attract much attention, Sikkim and Bhutan. Later, one was annexed by India in the 1960s, and the other became a protectorate of India. On the current map of British India, Sikkim and Bhutan are both part of British India and exist in the name of the state. India continues to start wars, and it also believes that it needs to restore the territory of British India. In other words, India is facing the territory of British India since ancient times. Putting this issue aside first, what Nehru thought was obviously not what the monarch of Hyderabad, Mir Osman Ali Khan, was concerned about. In fact, the two had diametrically opposed positions. Not to mention Sikkim and Bhutan, they are all on the edge of the South Asian subcontinent, and Hyderabad, currently the largest state in South Asia, occupies the center of the Deccan Plateau and is a place that the prosperous North India must control. Only then can we suppress South India, which is outside the control of North India most of the time. The gap between the north and the south of British India is far greater than that of China. The Tamils of South India have established countries several times. Except for the belief of Hinduism, there is nothing in common between North and South India. If Alan Wilson is in Nehru's position, it is impossible to acquiesce that Hyderabad will continue to be independent. Now let's talk about it. If according to Ali Jinnah's idea, the two major religions occupy the majority of the religion and establish an independent country. Dear Maharaja, if I divide it by simple religion, you should definitely be inclined to Ali Jinnah. Right. Alan Wilson pointed to Ali Khan's pacifist status. Ali Khan nodded and said without concealing this, if there were only these two options, of course I would choose Ali Jinnah. This is hard to do. Alan Wilson gave Ali Khan a pessimistic analysis out of a realistic attitude. Nehru will not let the state of Hyderabad maintain the status quo, and the sea controlled by the Maharaja. The Diraba state is far away from the northwestern provinces of the same religion or from the northeastern Bangladesh. According to the worst analysis, there is a religious war in South Asia, and you will be under the siege of Hinduism. It's just too far to get rescue from other peaceful people. Alan Wilson proved by practice that there is no worst, only worse, and continued in front of the silent Ali Khan. In Hyderabad, Hindus account for 80%, and pacifists are an absolute minority. Once Nehru incited Hindus to take a referendum, or some other way to find a reason, the matter is really difficult to solve. One more thing, the situation faced by the Junagadh state is similar to that of Hyderabad. The Junagadh state is located on the Kashava Peninsula in India, covering an area of about 50,000 square kilometers. The situation in this state is similar to that of Hyderabad. More than 80% of the residents are Hindus, and the monarch is a pacifist. Later, the king of the native state decided to join Pakistan, and the residents of the native state firmly opposed it and rioted. The monarch fled to Pakistan, and India took over the state. In Kashmir, which later caused the Indo-Pakistani War, it was just the opposite. The king was a Hindu, and most of the residents were pacifists. Kashmir eventually became the fuse of the India-Pakistan War. Before the British evacuated, because of the problem of the princely state, it was more than just a Kashmir issue. The princely state of Hyderabad and the princely state of Junagadh had the same problem as Kashmir. In the end, only a thunderbolt exploded in Kashmir, which was considered a good skill by Nehru. Having said that, after independence, India has no plans to talk to Pakistan at all. If the monarch is a pacifist, the majority of Hindus will vote. If the monarch is a Hindu, it will show respect for the opinion of the monarch of the land. Yours is mine, I is still mine. This attitude applies to everything India sees, and it will continue into the 21st century. Will it be divided according to Ali Jinnah's intention? London can continue to rule South Asia. After thinking about it, Ali Khan couldn't help but irritably said, you can continue to maintain the rule of London. Isn't that the same attitude as Prime Minister Churchill? Alan Wilson was silent and could not answer this question. He could not say that the earth had changed its owner. Now the strength of the United States and the Soviet Union has surpassed that of the dilapidated aristocrats of the United Kingdom. If the United Kingdom wants to maintain its rule in South Asia, it will definitely not be defeated by the United States. With the permission of the Soviet Union, the two countries will not look at Britain as if after World War I, and slowly use British India to recover. After the First World War, Britain's strength was still there, and it was still in the same category as the United States. At that time, the United States did not dare to risk its national destiny and fight against the British Empire with all its strength, and could only embarrassedly return to the Americas to continue isolationism. Today is different from the past. The strength of the United States has surpassed that of the United Kingdom. It will definitely not be like the fact that after the First World War, it was boycotted by Britain and France. And, at the same time, it was threatened by the United States and the Soviet Union. But as the British Empire's commissioner in Hyderabad, Alan Wilson can't say that I can no longer maintain a military presence in South Asia, so where does the British Empire's face go? After thinking about it, I came up with the argument of the liberal imperialists in London. Now the Indian people generally have the idea of independence, protests and riots are one after another, and the annual income from British India can no longer offset the business of British India. Expenses, London will not do money-losing business. Alan Wilson himself did not believe this. Although this kind of voice has existed for a long time, if it can continue to rule South Asia, who will take the noise seriously? While protesting against the reactionary war, while continuing the war, even the United States is proficient in playing it. Pretend that London must respect public opinion and push back the rhetorical question of the monarch of Hyderabad. This does not mean that he, the Commissioner of Hyderabad, is not prepared to do nothing before British India is about to become independent. Ali Khan has billions of dollars in fortune. As long as you give him a little bit as a commissioner, it is a figure that ordinary people can't earn in a lifetime. Although Alan Wilson has dug the Golden Temple in India, who would think too much money? Woolen cloth? Besides, Alan Wilson, whether in his past or present life, has reasons to cause trouble for India. Let's not mention the past life. The partition of India and Pakistan must be based on the interests of the Hindus from the overall environment, which cannot be changed. Because from a larger macro perspective, from the Strait of Gibraltar to Indonesia, there is a wide world of peace religion. Turning over the world map, it is clear at a glance that India after independence is an important part of severing the connection between the world of peace religion. If it is reversed, the post-independence South Asia will appear in the form of the ruler of the religion of peace, and the important cornerstone to cut off the world of the religion of peace will no longer exist. Therefore, the emergence of India with a predominantly Hindu population is a good thing for the current world situation. In turn, after independence, India may become the leading brother of the world of peace religion, which is a bad thing for any big country. You must know that the current outbreak in Europe started by completely trampling the world of peace in the Middle East. He believes that even the Soviet Union and countries that think like the Soviet Union hope that India will shoulder the responsibility of cutting off the religion of peace. However, India's self-expansion thinking is still a problem. The Hindus are the main force to suppress the forces of peace, but India cannot be made too strong. It is best to find something for India to do, which does not violate the world the original intention of making a contribution. Now, in front of the two bastards, I have to choose the less disgusting one. This is not a good multiple-choice question, but I believe that the entire British Empire cannot come up with a more suitable solution. Respected Maharaja, when do you think this war will end? Alan Wilson changed the subject and asked a seemingly irrelevant question. This has stopped the monarch of Hyderabad. The war has been going on for many years, and the Allies have taken the lead. Everyone can see that, but when the war will end, who knows? Respected Maharaja, only strength will be respected. Alan Wilson said with a reserved attitude, now there are 5 million British Empire troops fighting on various battlefields, they represent the powerful military power of the British Empire, but war it will end eventually, but their weapons have been manufactured, the tanks they operate, the planes and warships they drive are an unimaginable military legacy, and instead of rusting, it is better to use the residual heat after the war is over. This will also reduce the losses of the British Empire. What do you mean? Ali Khan seemed to have caught something, but his tone was still somewhat uncertain. Respected Maharaja, I want to see the army of Hyderabad as soon as possible. Alan Wilson nodded, affirming Ali Khan's guess, the weapons used by 5 million soldiers, it is still impossible to boost the army of the native country. Questionable. As for the army of Hyderabad, the religious beliefs of the rulers are clearly defined. You don't need to think about it to know that this army must be dominated by the religion of peace. The most fundamental reason is that the monarch Ali Khan is rich and can afford these armaments after the war. Flow. Can you do it? As a monarch, Mir Osman Ali Khan looked suspiciously. If the war ended earlier, there would be a time to do it. If nothing is done, the worst result will be captured. Now to answer the question of the Maharaja, let some of the armaments flow into Hyderabad, I think it can be done. Alan Wilson gave an affirmative answer, feeling that once the war was over, it would not be difficult for some of the armaments to be sold. Alan Wilson knows that out of the 5.7 million army of the British Empire, there are 2.58 million Indian soldiers, accounting for nearly half, which seems to be a lot. But this is what all the colonies of the British Empire can afford. Once India becomes independent, with India's own financial resources, it is impossible to support more than 2 million troops. In fact, in the early days of India's independence, it was not known for its military strength. Of course, it is not a problem to bully Pakistan. Moreover, he knows the evolution of the Indian Army. The Indian Army is mainly veterans, and the service years are generally very long. Even in 1962, a large number of Indian soldiers who fought in World War II served in the Indian Army. In 1945, these soldiers in their 20s and 30s were the main force nearly 20 years later. Being ruthlessly taught to be a man in the plateau area, Alan Wilson did not think highly of the Indian soldiers. It was also the most effective way to supplement the strength of Hyderabad in terms of military strength. Since meeting with Mir Osman Ali Khan, Alan Wilson has a goal in mind, that is, in the process of British India's independence, he must reap the benefits as much as possible, which will be beneficial to his future career in the British civil service. Promotion plays an important role. The status of British India is extremely important, but it does not belong to the British mainland. In fact, it will be very embarrassing to some extent. For example, the 100,000 civil servants currently working in British India, once British India becomes independent, how many will continue to hold iron rice bowls? No one knows that Alan Wilson definitely doesn't want to have himself in the army looking for a job. Although the sparrow is small and complete, the state of Hyderabad has all the elements of a country. The entire state is the private property of Mir Osman Ali Khan himself. In order to protect the sanctity of private property, of course Mir Osman Ali Khan will not care about the entire state. What are Hindus thinking? It just so happens that, as an Englishman, the current commissioner of Hyderabad also does not consider what the colonists think. The facts are very clear. Ali Khan has money and now wants to maintain the status of a private kingdom in Hyderabad. And Alan Wilson, for the sake of money, decided to help the ally of the British Empire for 300 years. A few days later, Alan Wilson brought a few assistants to the Hyderabad military camp to see if there was anything remarkable about this private army. To be honest, in the eyes of Alan Wilson, who had seen the steel torrent of later generations, this army, the private army in Hyderabad, is really not enough to see, and that's all there is to someone with a gun. Reading www.uuganshu.com. The heavy weapon is the Maxim machine gun that was widely used during the First World War. The semi-automatic rifle only belongs to the personal guard of Mir Osman Ali Khan himself. The most eye-catching is the cavalry unit in Hyderabad. Seeing this scene, Alan Wilson even had the feeling that he was going to the Indian military parade in person. The commissioner is in a bad mood. Commissioner, the Lee Enfield rifles of these Hyderabad soldiers seem to be very old models. Andy, the assistant who followed him, whispered, "Is Maharaja Ali Khan showing off his force to us?" "That's not it, it's just a simple display." Alan Wilson said without looking back, "What is this?" Let alone 1945, even in the 21st century, the old-fashioned Lee Enfield rifle, a weapon that was finalized in 1896, is still the main light weapon of the Indian Army. After the performance of the private army in Hyderabad, Alan Wilson immediately extended his hands and applauded, with an expression worthy of being an ally of the British Empire for 300 years, and was very impressed by the performance without any dazzling performances. With a stylized smirk, Alan Wilson said to Ali Khan's son Abdullah Khan, "The army of Hyderabad is worthy of being a long-time ally of the British Empire." In all fairness, this army is mainly composed of pacifists. In addition to being inferior in size, it is no worse than the soldiers of the Indian Legion, but if you consider the current combat literacy of the European army, there are still some areas for improvement. Considering that the army of the native state of Hyderabad will definitely fight the Indian army once in the future, of course he, the Hyderabad commissioner, has nothing bad to say. What if the morale of this Indian enemy is dampened? Even Alan Wilson knows that, Given Hyderabad's geographical location and the composition of its residents, it is almost impossible to resist the attack of the Indian Army, but for the sake of money, this is the most professional army in South Asia at present. Compared with the Hyderabad Commissioner of British India, he is now obviously more concerned about Ali Khan's role as a dog-headed military advisor. After all, the wages of British India are dead, and it is far from the wealth of the former richest man in the world that he is tempted. Although Alan Wilson was a keyboard warrior in his last life, he only followed the old Wilson to hear and witness the logistics work in this life, which is far less impressive than the Great Famine in Bengal. But he still has a say in the army that cannot support the wall in South Asia, not to mention that he is the Commissioner of Hyderabad and a close partner of the current monarch, who is dedicated to the future of the Hyderabad state. Even if the military strength of the British Empire is not known for the army. Hiding the nature of his military blindness, Alan Wilson was somewhat politically incorrect as the leader of the Axis powers, the Army of the Third Reich, and set a benchmark, saying that the weapon of the tank is currently necessary for the Army of Hyderabad. Europe has caused 2 world wars in a few decades. It was born out of ideas and tactics. It is a sympathy for this huge destructive power. The Hyderabad army must be equipped with enough tanks to be able to deter potential enemies. Alan Wilson speaks decisively, and the military blind is righteous. What are the words of the King of Land Battle and the cooperation of Bhutan constantly being spoken out of their mouths, coupled with the unfathomable expression on the surface, but in reality, it is not a problem to deter the officers of the high caste. The religion of peace in South Asia is also divided into castes. The World War has now come to an end and its strength is obvious. How to deal with a large number of armaments in the future is also a problem. Hyderabad needs these armaments, in fact, many princely states also need them, even Ali Jinnah and Nehru. Alan Wilson said as he walked, but whether for national interests or private reasons, I prefer those armaments to fall into the hands of friendly people. The friendship between Hyderabad and the British Empire has been proven through battles again and again. Abdullah Hanan said semi-publicly and semi-privately, it has passed the test of blood and practice. I know this, but the London side considers the issues more comprehensively. Those politicians in London never focus on morality when they consider issues. In a sense, I and the young assistants I brought will actually do make irrational judgments, and those old men won't. Alan Wilson said with a half-smile, in short, I am absolutely qualified as a friend, and I will try my best to protect the interests of Hyderabad. Mentioning his importance to Hyderabad is not entirely self-proclaimed, and his analysis of London politicians is not all slander. What British politicians are like, just look at the United States who follow the same example. When I returned to the British residential area, I talked about this with the assistants I brought, but not all of them agreed. After all, not all the assistants who just came out of school knew about the status of British India. Commissioner Allen, why do we care so much about a princely state? One of the 10 assistants, an assistant named Alyssa, asked, and this is not something we can decide, should we inform Delhi? Aspect. Alyssa is 1 year older than Alan Wilson. Although she is not an absolute beauty, she is also a rather attractive woman with long red hair draped over her shoulders. At this moment, she is standing in front of Alan Wilson, with a fair face. Full of confusion. Who else is as puzzled as Alice? Alan Wilson took out a cigarette and lit it, and waved his other hand to ask for advice. All of a sudden, 4 assistants raised their hands. Alan Wilson nodded and said, I don't hide this from you, I treat you as my own, and to be honest, you and I are in the same situation. Many people treat us well. The land under your feet is not so well understood, at least none of you know. Now India, whether it is the Congress Party or the Muslim League, is fighting for independence, right? How about that? As long as London doesn't allow it, they can still drive us away. An assistant said in dissatisfaction. Do you think that after this war is over, Britain can still have a chance to breathe like it did after World War I? Alan Wilson's mouth curled slightly, if we really have that chance, of course it's a good thing. But will the Americans and the Soviets give us time? This is the disadvantage of bringing a group of college students to take office. If it is an old civil servant with work experience, they will know what is going on with just a question, but these college students can't. Reading www.uugonshu.com. Alan Wilson had no choice but to go back to his previous life and analyze the current world situation. There was pressure from the United States and the Soviet Union on the outside, and Nehru and Jinnah on the inside. From what he said, the British Empire now has some internal and external troubles, and it is even more dangerous than when it was dealing with the attack of the Third Reich. It was like this. Even if the British Empire faced the attack of the Third Reich alone, with the support of the British colonies, as long as it was willing to go out, it might not be able to repeat the glory of World War I. And now facing the pressure of the US and the Soviet Union, and now all classes in British India are no longer in the same heart as Britain. It is almost impossible to be tough in order to protect British India. How powerful the United States and the Soviet Union are, and how powerful they are now, these students in the colonies can see. Subsequent history has also proved this. Under the circumstances, the United Kingdom chose a soft landing and granted the independence of its colonies in batches, and it started from the most important colony, British India, which itself was a compromise to the United States and the Soviet Union, indicating that the era of the British Empire in this world has passed. Even if Alan Wilson knows the future trend, he has no ability to change history, but it is the United States and the Soviet Union. How can these two countries believe that Britain has really given up world hegemony without giving up British India? However, in the process of the British Empire's soft landing, some colonies that are geographically important and easy to control are preserved, and Alan thinks it can still be done. For a colony of more than 30 million square kilometers, the idea of retaining a few 100,000 square kilometers of land is not too much. And the colonial empire is not just the British Empire itself. France, the Netherlands, Belgium and even Portugal are all run-down aristocrats.